welcome to video lesson 6.6. We are specifically going to be talking about the distributive property only in this lesson. You received a yellow note sheet. Fill in your table of contents. We're going to be just trimming it down and gluing it into page 76. So title it Distributive Property. And we have about 5 boxes that make up this note sheet. So we're going to start at the top and work our way to the bottom. The first box has a little phrase in quotation marks that I want you to fill in. When you hear the word distributive property, I want you to always remember that you have to draw arrows. So what I mean by that is the distributive property takes a number, like 2, and distributes it or hands it out to each number inside the parenthesis. So we're taking the parenthesis, the x plus 3, and we're breaking it apart and pairing it with a 2. So I want you to always draw an arrow from the 2 to the x, forcing you to remember that you have to pair the 2 with the x as the first part of rewriting this using the distributive property. And now I'm going to use a different color. Then we have to pair the 2 with the 3. A lot of students forget to pair it twice. And so that 2 is going to be multiplied by the 3. The last piece that you have to remember is that this gets added. So this is how you show the distributive property with those arrows. Then the last step is to actually just combine if you can. I can't really do anything with this 2 and the x, so I'm just going to put 2x down, symbolizing that we're going to multiply the 2 numbers together. And then I am going to multiply 2 times 3. Let me show you some pictures. This represents a picture representation of what is inside this parenthesis. We don't know what this x stands for, so we're just going to have this green bar representing an x. And then we have 3 units, and those are represented by these yellow squares. We're going to be doing something similar to this in Chapter 7 to talk about solving equations with pictures and manipulatives, but this represents one group of x plus 3. The catch is we don't have one group of x plus 3. We have 2 groups of x plus 3. So how many x's do we have total? We have 2 of them. That's why you see the 2 in front of the x. And then how many little 1 units do we have? We have 6. So more about picture representation and hands-on ways to think about algebra coming your way after Chapter 6. And now we're going to go down to the second box. So here we're going to practice rewriting an expression using the distributive property or applying the distributive property to it. So we are going to like to have 2 different colors. That will help you remember what to do. If you don't have 2 different colors, that's okay. I'm going to use that so that hopefully you see the 2 pieces. So first you have to pair the 8 with the x. And we are always multiplying. Any number sitting to the left or right, the 8 could be over here, but it's not. Any number sitting to the left of a parenthesis doesn't have an operation showing right here, but it is multiplication. So we have an 8 and an x being multiplied. Then we need another arrow. I'm going to make it a different color just so that you see you have to distribute the 8 to each number inside. We don't know what this number is, so we're just going to call it x for right now. The blue is from the 8 to the 3, so we're going to multiply 8 and 3 together. And then we're going to add them at the end. So it's just another way to do the math. Instead of adding first and then multiplying, we're going to multiply first and then So we're playing with gems a little bit, but the cool thing about the property is it equals the same thing. It doesn't matter in this case what we do. So now we're going to simplify this down by just combining what we can. We can multiply 8 times 3. We can't do anything with the 8 and the x. So all I'm going to do is get rid of the parenthesis and write the phrase 8x plus 24. So these two expressions are the same. Go ahead and draw 2 arrows over the word distributive because that's the main point of what I want you to remember. When you see the word distributive, I want you to think, ooh, I have to draw 2 arrows. So go ahead and put those right above that word. Example 2, we have 5 sitting outside the parenthesis and then 9 and an x inside. So we're going to draw our 2 arrows again. The 5 is going to be paired first with the 9 and multiplied. Then the 5 is also going to be paired with the x and multiplied. And at the end, we're going to add. Now we have to simplify. 5 and 9 multiplied together. And then we have to just stick the variable with the coefficient, and we have 5x. It's okay if the 5x is last. Does not matter because remember, addition is commutative. We could rewrite this 5x plus 45 if we really wanted to. The third box down is now going to force us to see why the distributive property could be useful when we're solving problems. And that's mainly because we can use the distributive property to mentally find answers easier. So let me show you how this works. You have a multiplication problem in example 3. We are taking a whole number and multiplying it by a mixed number. We know how to do that from chapter 4. We can change this to an improper fraction, put the 9 over 1, multiply across, and then we get an improper fraction we have to divide, and then simplify if we need to. So those are a lot of steps. Let me show you how we can do it with the distributive property. This mixed number is 4 wholes and a third combined, 4 and a third. We can break that mixed number up and show it as 4 plus 1/3. But the problem is we have to multiply 9 by the entire mixed number. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this 4 1/3, and we have to multiply the whole thing by 9. So now this becomes a distributive property kind of problem because we can now pair the 9 with the 4. That's 9 times 4. And then we can take the whole number 9 and pair it with the fraction 1/3. We're going to add. So 9 is going to be paired with 1/3. This is a lot easier to do. 9 times a third is just 9 over 3, which is the whole number 3. I'm going to come over here. When we multiply 9 and 4, we get a 36. And when we do this multiplication, 9 thirds, which is 3. So we end up very easily seeing 2 whole numbers, and we have an answer of 39. Go ahead and circle this answer, and we'll move on to the next one. Example 4, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to split this mixed number into its whole number and its fraction, and we're going to add them. So we have, over here, this is going to be equal to the whole number 2 plus 1/4. But we have to multiply this by 12. So the 12 is going to be sitting on the outside of this parentheses. Now let's do the distributive property. We're going to pair the 12 and distribute that to the 2. And that will just be 12 times 2. Then we're going to pair the 12 with the 1/4 Again, making this part a lot easier because 12 and 4 are compatible with each other. So if you want to see, remember with fractions, we're going to have 12 over 4, which is 3. So all of this boils down to 24 plus 3. So we have our answer of 27. Put a box around this one. And those are two examples of how we can solve problems mentally or easily with the distributive property. Continuing on down, the next box just has a word problem in it because oftentimes we shy away from word problems because we think they're all that complicated. So I want to walk you through one, and this might be something that you see tomorrow as well. So each day we have Mr. Brain here. He's lifting weights. There he is. And he's lifting weights for 10 minutes. And then, there he is over there again, running on the treadmill for 25 minutes. So that's the information we're given. He's lifting weights and he's running. Write two equivalent expressions and then find the total minutes that Mr. Brain exercises for the 7 days that he's going to be doing this. So every day he does two things. He lifts weights and he runs. But that is repeated for 7 days. So you see that this is part of the distributive property. The two things he's doing in one day is he's spending 10 minutes lifting weights and 25 minutes running. But this gets repeated or multiplied for all 7 days. So that is one expression. Write two expressions for the 7 days. Now we have to use the distributive property to come up with the next expression. So that 7 is going to be distributed to the 10. And so now we have 7 and 10 being multiplied. Then the 7 is going to be paired with the 25. And then we add at the end. So these are the two expressions that we have to show the distributive property two different ways. And now we're actually going to do the math because we don't have any variables here. We just have the numbers. So we can multiply 10 times 7, 70, and then 25 times 7, but it ends up being 175. When you add these two together, you get the total of 245. Because this is a word problem and we know we're dealing with minutes, you do need to include the unit at the end. Go ahead and put a star next to that answer. This is the last thing that you have in your notes, and it's something I mentioned in the distributive property page of your property book. And it's a little tricky, that's why I have 4 examples here, because I want to practice this a little bit more with you than just 2 examples. So there's this phrase called factoring out an expression. So we're going to be needing to think about common factors that numbers have with each other. And factoring out or factor each expression means we're going to think of a factor that these two numbers have in common, and we're going to pull it out. So what number do both of these have in common as a factor? We can multiply both of these numbers by 4. So now I'm going to think what times 4 is 12, and it is 3. And what times 4 is 8, and it is 2. We are adding these two together. Now we can rewrite this using the distributive property. We don't have to put the 4 twice. We can pull the 4 outside of the parenthesis and then just combine the two numbers that we have in these two parentheses. So I'll say that again. This number 3 and this number 2 is going to be pulled into one parenthesis and added, and we're simplifying the fact that we don't need 2 of these. Let's just call it 1 4, and then the 3 and the 2 can be over to the right. So let me try this one with you. First, think what number can be multiplied with both of these numbers. What factor do these numbers have in common? They both are divisible by 3. So 3 is the greatest common factor. So I'm going to think, what can I multiply by 3 to get each number? 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 7 is 21. Now I have something that looks like the distributive property once we draw those arrows. And now I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to just take one of these 3's and place it on the outside of one set of parentheses. And now I'm going to take the numbers here, 3 and 7, and put them on the inside. So it's basically doing the distributive property backwards. Let's now try it with some variables. When you have an x, the only thing you have to do is look at the 3 and the 15 and ask yourself the same question. What factor do they have in common? So the 3, the coefficient 3, and the constant 15, there's some vocabulary review for you, have a common factor of 3. So I'm going to do the same thing. What times 3 will get me 3x? Well, I don't know what x is, so I'm going to just put the x in there. And then ask myself the same question, what times 3 gives me 15, and that is a 5. So now I have the same setup that I had up here, except for that this first parenthesis is unknown. That's okay, I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm going to put 1, 3 on the outside of a parenthesis, and then whatever's in these little guys, I'm going to put inside this one. Let's try the last one. So I have a variable, so I'm just going to look at the coefficient and this constant. It's flipped around, but that's okay. What number do 4 and 16 have in common as a common factor, and that is 4. I'm going to have 4 times what is 16, and that's a 4. And then 4 times what is 4x. I don't know what x is, so I have to just drag it down here. Now I'm going to rewrite this so that there's only 1 4 on the outside of the parenthesis, and these numbers, this 4 inside here, and this x is going to be what's on the inside of this. So we are going to practice factoring out. We're going to practice some word problems and practicing rewriting using the distributive property all day tomorrow. Hopefully by the end of that and this video, you'll be a little bit more comfortable with the hardest property of them all, in my opinion. So I look forward to seeing you then.